Hey guys, it's Alex with Hammond Watch. I'm here today with the Fawler Ryka. And Fawler is a brand that I was only loosely familiar with. They're sold through a website called Trend Him. Trend Him is like a men's fashion retailer. They'll do everything from kind of leather bags to cufflinks and ties, and they have a fair amount of watches on their site, and most of which I really wouldn't be particularly interested in. Again, all very kind of fashion watches. But when I saw this design, I kind of thought, what the heck? You know, I think overall it's kind of an attractive watch, and I wanted to get a little bit of a closer look at it. Now, fair warning, Trend Him did send me this watch to keep. It's in no way going to affect my feedback here. As you'll see later on in the video, there's certainly pros and cons. But overall, I think it's an interesting piece, and it kind of brings up a more interesting topic around fashion watches in general. So let's start with the sizing. If you go to measure the case from the top of the watch, you'll get 43 millimeters, but the actual size of the case is 41. You'll see there is some bezel overhang, giving it a little bit more of a larger visual footprint, but it wears true to the kind of that 41 millimeter size feel. The thickness of the watch is 14 millimeters, although probably a millimeter, maybe a millimeter and a half of that is this double domed sapphire crystal. I'm a pretty big fan of the blue AR coating that they use. I think it gives a nice kind of premium feel overall. Your crown is a screw down crown, which I was very pleased with. Signed with the Fawler F, and it is 5.5 millimeters wide. Your 4 millimeter pushers are not screw down, but overall the watch does have 100 meters of water resistance. So for a quartz chronograph, really no complaints. You're looking at a 50 millimeter lug tip to lug tip. If you bring the strap in and kind of measure that effective lug to lug, you're at 48.5. In general, I feel like anything under 50 millimeters tends to fit most wrists. You have a nice 120 click unidirectional bezel. It's got a very nice snap to it. I will say, it doesn't feel tinny or overly cheap. There is the slightest amount of play, but it's really not bad at all. The only negative with the bezel is that it is misaligned. You know, I pick on Seiko for it, so I'll certainly pick on Fawler for it. You know, quality control is a huge thing for me, and you know, it just tends to bug me. Now, this isn't awful. You'll see, you know, maybe half a millimeter off to the left, but it certainly is noticeable when you're wearing the watch. Outside of the alignment, the bezel really is a highlight of the watch for me. You know, Breitling does this with some of their Super Oceans, where there's not a bezel insert, but instead the bezel is one solid piece of stainless steel. You leave the indices raised, and then you mill out the backdrop and paint it. Overall, I think it gives the watch a really tough and masculine look, which kind of fits with the overall aesthetic. And in general, I just like the design language. The case back is fairly basic, which I don't have any problems with. You have some general branding, a reminder that the watch is designed in Denmark, where Fawler is based, and then a reminder of the 100 meters of water resistance. Behind this screw down case back, there is a Miyota 6S21. That is a quartz two-handed chronograph, and it operates at plus or minus 20 seconds a month. And in general, if you're going with a quartz chronograph, there's absolutely nothing wrong with a Miyota movement, in my opinion. Coming out of the watch's 22 millimeter lugs, you'll see I have it on this kind of thicker seatbelt style strap. This is not stock to the watch. When you order, it actually comes with some NATO straps. They sent over both army green and black. They're not particularly premium feeling. It's not a silky kind of seatbelt style, more just your traditional kind of cheap NATO. The main reasons I took it off are one, I really dislike these thick nylon keepers. I think metal hardware would have looked much nicer. But the other reason is that having a strap that's going to go underneath the watch was a no-go for me because at 14 millimeters thick and being a little bit chunky, I didn't want to pull it farther away from my wrist and create any type of wobbliness. But being a 22 millimeter lug, your strap options are going to be plentiful, and I think this would even look killer on something leather. The dial for this watch is very handsome. I love watches that use the 6S21 and have that 2 sub-dial layout. I think it provides a great deal of balance, and it's very kind of visually pleasing. I also appreciate that Fawler did a good job in keeping the text very minimal. That way there's a lot of legibility, with a pilot style or military style watch. Visibility is a big key aspect to the design, and I think they did a good job with that execution. The indices and hands are that kind of faux-tinted cream, and my only real complaint when it comes to the overall aesthetic is, with a fully brushed case, having a polished handset, polished sub-dial hands, and then that little polished ring around the date. I don't know that it's completely cohesive. But in general, I think that's a pretty small gripe. I do appreciate the ring around the date. I think it draws your eye towards it and makes it a little bit more legible. Also, the subdials being the brushed ring within kind of that radial pattern underneath, I think adds a little bit of visual interest to a watch that could have otherwise been pretty plain. In general, the lume on the watch isn't bad, but it's not great. You get a nice bright green vivid glow, but it does fade relatively quickly. You'll have a couple hours of low light visibility, but in no way is this going to make it through the night. That said, one added feature that I really do appreciate is they are looming the date in the date wheel. That's not something you see from many brands, and in general I think it's a pretty cool feature. Here we are in my 7.5 to 7 3/4 inch wrist. And I must say, while the watch may look a little bit chunky, it fits extremely well. The true 41 millimeter case, and then the effective lug to lug being sub 50 means it looks like a bigger piece than it actually wears like. And having that quartz movement, there's not a ton of heft, so it's not wobbly or anything. It feels very secure and lays extremely flat, especially once you switch over to a 2-piece strap. Which I would absolutely recommend, especially since you're already at 14 millimeters thick. Alright, so let's recap my likes and dislikes with this watch. My likes, the overall design, I love the balance of the dial. The cream colored lume really works for this kind of military style chronograph. I think it ties everything together well. I love that they used a AR coated sapphire crystal. Really gives kind of that next level, slightly premium feel. The case being a bit chunky and having a screw down crown, everything feels very solid. Like in no way does this feel flimsy or fragile like a lot of fashion watches that I've experienced in the past. And then in general, I appreciate the movement. I don't mind quartz watches. I like to keep a couple of them in the collection, just in case everything else has died and I need something to just kind of grab and go with. Having a Miyota 6S21, it's one of the movements I enjoy the most. I tend to get a lot of battery life out of them, and great accuracy at that plus or minus 20 seconds a month. My dislikes, I think they could have made the watch a little bit thinner. Having that movement, I think they could have brought this in another couple of millimeters and maybe had it at 13, and it would have been phenomenal and fit better on a NATO. That said, on a 2-piece strap, this still wears extremely comfortable, so that's a small gripe. I would have preferred to see the hands brushed or maybe painted silver, just to kind of tone it down. I don't think that the polishing necessarily works with the overall aesthetic. And then on top of that, the alignment really kind of bugs me. I understand that this is a common problem with even the bigger boys like Seiko. But when you're trying to gain market share, especially as a fashion watch, I think you need to hit those small details just a little bit better. Now, that said, in the kind of hierarchy of fashion watches, at the top for me are the Shinola, and I even put Veyer up there. I know not everyone considers Veyer a fashion watch, but they sell a lot of quartz pieces, and it's really more design oriented. I think they have a little bit of a leg up in that they both boast US assembly. While designed in Denmark is a cool aspect of the watch. If it was created in Denmark or if it was assembled in Denmark, I think there would have been just kind of that next level of promotion and kind of desirability. It would have been a cooler aspect of the watch, because I think we all know when we see designed in a certain area, we kind of know where the watch is coming from and being manufactured. But that said, this is, for me, leaps and bounds ahead of any Vincero or movement watch I've seen. So I think that Fawler is headed in the right direction. I know they have a couple of automatic pieces, and in general, if you go to Trendhim and look around, I think Fawler far and away has the best designs of any of their brands that they offer. This watch's cost is $250 USD. I think in general that's pretty fair. You can absolutely go on AliExpress or some of the gray market sites and find better value watches. But as far as looking for a nice chronograph with a sapphire crystal, I definitely don't think that price is ridiculous. I don't think it's overblown. I think it's kind of right on the money for what you're going to get, especially in a retail setting. So no real complaints. Thank you guys for watching. If you've enjoyed this or found it helpful, please don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. Also consider subscribing. I put watch content out weekly at a minimum, and I hope to see you in the next one.